Conference. And we're going to be touching on managing the designer and researcher relationship. I think this is actually a really important just topic to really go over. And we want to provide you guys with the tools to be successful in this. In terms of just the general outlay of how we're going to be working. So after this, we'll go into brief introductions, and then we'll go through the framework that we'll introduce around process, partnership, and practice, the 3 Ps. Keep that in your head. And then from there, we will then have takeaways that you can apply tomorrow. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A and have you all be able to answer some questions for us. So allow us to reintroduce ourselves. I should have brought out the horn, but I didn't have it on my side, whatever. Renee, I'm gonna put you on the spot. So we're gonna switch this up, y'all. We're not gonna go through like, our whole LinkedIn profile. We'll provide you links to that a little bit later. We're gonna switch it up and go a little bit different. And Renee, I have a question for you, right? So this is Fireside with Renee and Harrison. It'd be great if you could maybe go into an experience that you had early in your career that really has impacted you, or at least stuck with you as you start to progress.
Yeah, so first, quickly, just want to acknowledge this space, all the great people. Thank you all so much for, one, being patient with us and just sharing and holding this space with us. It's just kind of ironic because this is our first time actually doing a presentation together. So the fact that it just went like this is just, just inaugurate, a little inauguration here. So early in my career, before I became a UX researcher and was on this journey, this is very timely because during the last recession around 2008, 2009, I had graduated college, I was well into my career, and I actually had to take a position as a waitress and a hostess. So it was creating this massive pivot in an area that I didn't think that I was ever going to have to do. Again, having a college degree and all these things. But it was through that experience that I gained a whole new level of empathy that I think has carried with me and really been instilled with me that I utilize and tap into on a daily basis as a UX researcher, of course. But I have so many memories of that experience that translate even to now as a UX researcher in tech. And so I'll throw it back on you. Same question.
Oh, so much pressure, so much pressure. But we made it through the video hiccup, so I think we can do anything. Yeah, I'm gonna go way, way, way back. So my first job was as a web developer. And I was working for my mom. They called it like a webmaster back then. And so this was before the days of CSS and sort of JavaScript frameworks. And I was having a conversation with my mom, this summer, and she was like, you know what, Harrison, like, I really actually had to advocate for you to have this role. And, it really taught me about the importance of having somebody advocate for you when you're not in the room. And then also just how important it is at a young age to really be exposed to technology. And, thematically, we'll be going over sort of topics around partnerships and how we can advocate each other, because ultimately that can lead to a wild and amazing outcomes, right? And so, you like how I typed that all together? So
we're gonna leverage both for sure, the empathy and advocating for one another.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, super quick, what's not on your LinkedIn profile?
Not on my LinkedIn profile. I am a proud Bison mother. So shout out to all my Howard University people, HU. My money and my child go to Howard, so that I am infamous for saying that. So big shout out to all my HBCU family out there. And you, it's not on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of is on my profile, but when I graduated from Iowa, I started a music promotion company. So we produced, we marketed, did all that kind of stuff, sold the tickets. And every single act that I brought in has been Grammy nominated. So that's kind of my claim to fame there.
Then there's that on that. All right, let's roll into it.
All right. So Renee, do you want to help the audience like kind of level set in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, so this conversation around managing the designer and researcher relationship really stems from our years of experience throughout the UX industry, and really comes from places where there may be developed teams, they're more enterprise teams, but for those of you who may be in more agency, small boutique design teams of one, or researchers team of one, there's going to be still information that we're going to be sharing that you can still utilize, that you can still foster as part of your day-to-day, and then also information that you're going to be able to take that you can utilize in bigger and larger settings. So just want to make sure that we level set on where we're coming from, and a lot of things we're going to be talking about is going to be from a higher level, but again, very applicable to these different types of work streams and work environments.
Thank you so much. So as we get started, I just also want to level set in terms of the process that we're going to be going through. I think it's always important to just sort of ground ourselves in terms of an artifact on how we can start to really kind of unify, throughout our working relationships. And one of the things that we're going to do, we're going to talk about the double diamond. Now, there are so many different visualizations of the design process, whether they're squiggly lines or circles. I do think, both of us think that double diamond sort of best describes this, right? And so if we were to sort of go over this super briefly in terms of what that means, it is obviously looks like what it says, 2 diamonds that are broken in half. So in the first diamond is really a little bit more generative, right? Where you're starting to go through the discovery process, diverge on different ideas, and then eventually converge on a singular idea that you're going to be advancing with. And then that second piece, you'll be going into the development and ultimately delivering. When we start to think about where research generally plays, I feel like it is traditionally thought of in this first diamond. However, there's more to it. And Renee is going to elaborate a little bit more in terms of how research should be integrated throughout the process.
Harrison, can you try to reshare your screen? I think I just want to check with everyone. Is everyone seeing any images?
Oh.
Yeah, there's no images on the screen. Flies of no's. So
Hopin decided to just like not share my screen, but we're back.
Okay.
You see this now? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, wow. Am I frozen or is Harrison frozen? Harrison is frozen. Okay. Harrison, if you can hear us, please come back and log back in. We're going to get through this, y'all. We are going to get through this. I'm about to light some sage in a minute and throw some holy water or something. So, all right. So we'll wait for Harrison to come back in and then refresh. But yeah, we wanted to start with the double diamond process, and as a way to kind of create a foundation of where this relationship and strategic planning can start. So the double diamond, again, some people may be familiar with it, some people may not be, but that's exactly what Harrison was talking about in terms of the divergent side, kind of starting out and kind of finding things and then converging, making sure that things are coming together, things are starting to make sense. So perfect timing, Harrison. I was just reiterating the divergent and convergent side of the double diamond. So go for it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So we're just going to kind of go over some opportunities on where that can be applied, right? So earlier on, really kind of thinking about discovery in the early stages, formative research into sort of the mid stages of that first diamond, and then getting into the evaluative stage as you're starting to move into that second diamond. I'm going to punt it off back to Renee so she can also sort of dive in a little bit deeper in terms of what these different phases mean.
Yeah, so what's really important on that illustration that we were showing, was the different kind of phases and different types of research that can be done throughout the process. And it's really important that design and research really have that partnership to understand what is the right research to do when. And so a lot of times, and we'll talk about kind of where a lot of people tend to lean towards on research, but looking at these three buckets of research: discovery, formative, and evaluative. When designers and researchers and product people can really understand the value of where to leverage the type of research during the process, it makes for much better project planning, product planning, development, and innovation. So the discovery process, also known as foundational, way before designs are even created, is more of the exploratory side of research, right? Identifying the opportunities. What do we not know? Where is there gaps in the information that we want to really find out to really help build the foundation of what we're trying to build, or what we're trying to design? And this is such an important part of the partnership. And so that design and research and product need to be on the same level here in terms of what is it that we're really trying to go after and find. So that's the discovery process. Then after discovery and kind of, again, going in the double diamond as a foundation of a process, you can then go into the more formative side of research. So maybe at this time, you've got some idea of the direction, maybe not the full directions, but kind of, again, the iteration brainstorming. And so you're working with some designs at this point. And so research can then be brought in to really help assess the ideas. And I want to hone in on something here. A lot of people talk about validating at this part of the process. I am so big on helping my partners change that vernacular to say not validate, but investigate. We're still investigating. We're still trying to find out, is this the right thing that we should be building and going after? And then after formative, we look at more of the evaluative, where now we've got some directions, we've got some good answers, maybe need to get some more insights, but now maybe this thing's already at a good place. We've tested. And I just want to make sure that I highlight this is not a linear process. Again, it goes round and round. But evaluative, we then can really start testing and analyzing and really understand the outcomes of what we've actually designed. So again, this may be a refresher for some and maybe news to other, but the why I want to really hone in on this is because this really helps set the context to the conversations. It sets the context as to the why things are being done, so that, you know, when research and design are in a room with product, we can then become a united force to say, this is why this process is important during this time. We need to investigate this. We're not sure about these, what we're trying to build here. So we need to make sure that we're going after the right opportunity. All right. So discovery, formative, evaluative. All right. So.
All right. Oh. My turn?
Yes, sorry, I'm sorry.
All right.
So continuing on the partnership, sorry, I needed some water right there. So continuing on again, as we talk about the process within research and design, this is what can help lead to the partnership. So wanted to set that context first, and then Harrison will do us the favor of talking about the importance of going to the partnership.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you know, a lot of times in organizations, you get really caught up in these different roles. And one of the things that I really like to also kind of level set on is that we are all actually contractually obligated to really be solving and building things for our users, right? For our customers. And ultimately, that's where we success. And so I think if we really level set in that, we are partners together in this journey. And so, you know, when we're not partners, unfortunately, you're in a situation where, you know, we're in an agency model. And, you know, what's not great about an agency model is that, for one, you don't really have a lot of time, right? Things are very time boxed. You're very reactive. And when you're very reactive, it is actually extremely hard to grow, right? And this growing is a definition that I think of in two ways, right? Especially as a manager, right? Growing as an individual contributor, but then also growing as an organization, because you really do not have the time to start thinking about what are the really main things that you should be focusing on or areas of opportunities that you can dive deep on. And so really by having a collective approach to design in the research process, you become more effective strategic partners versus just being in a individual singular role that's just coming in day out and just doing their job, right? There's nothing fun about that. And I know for most of you all, you don't want to be in a situation where you're just doing, you're putting your head down, going in day out, and things get monotonous.
That production type of work, right? Where it's just like putting out and putting this stuff out, but not really taking that time to really sit back and really strategize in terms of what you're doing.
Exactly. If we really, I think the part that this is actually a really important part, right? It's like, how can you transform from being so process oriented into being a partner? Because I think, ultimately my motivation as a manager, I just don't want to be considered a manager. I want to be considered a strategic partner. I want to get in on business conversations. I want to make changes and impact to, our business, direction of our business, right? And each and every single one of you should feel empowered to do that, right? And so being empowered to do that and being a partner allows you, especially with your research team, to really be able to push back on issues, right? I'm going to save this a little bit later because Renee is going to do a little deeper dive into sort of situational things that research tends to kind of be put in that I'm sure a lot of you all will be able to resonate with. But then also there's this piece around time, right? And I'll elaborate in terms of how you can make time happen. But, all of this together is going to help you be able to get ahead and start to strategize, right? So, this is sort of the $1 million question. And, I'm going to give you a little bit, probably more of an anecdotal background, right? Because, I've managed a couple of different teams and organizations where we didn't really have a research team, and then other organizations where we had a larger investment on that side, right? So, Renee, did I lose you? Let me know if I'm still here. Are you there? Okay, perfect. So there are really kind of three things that I really want to talk to, and these have been very transformative for me. The first piece is set aside time during planning. This is the easiest thing that you can do. And so I would implore you, if there's not anyone in the design or research function that is involved in planning, then you guys need to knock on that door and get in, because it's actually going to be extremely hard to advocate for anything else if you don't have that seat at the table. The second piece is to get ahead of non-engineering funded projects, or get ahead of engineering funded projects. There's a typo on my end. The moment that you have engineering tied to projects, you are automatically in a situation where you are time boxed. And the problem with being time boxed, it's hard to gain leverage, right? I mean, this is business. You can't go to the table if you don't have anything to negotiate with. And time is really, really important there, okay? And then learning how to say no. 2 letters, so simple, but it is an art form that you need to master if you are going to gain leverage. And so if there are a ton of projects that are coming through, you need to learn how to say no. Now, the question is how? It goes back to planning, all right? Planning and then prioritization. And then research will then also uncover that. So, this is all sort of a progression, but I really want you to keep these 3 things in mind, all right?
And as a researcher, what's really important, especially with being able to push back and say no in this partnership, is being able to offer solutions and recommendations, right? So it's no but. Yeah. No, we shouldn't do it, but we need to probably do this. No, we're not going to do this type of research, but would be really a better use of resource and time is if we do this type of research. So no but gets you a lot further. And then really quick, I know we're only going to go to 15 minutes after. So a lot of this, because we lost some time in the beginning, so we could probably speed through a little bit so we can get to a Q&A as well.
Yeah. So look, we're going to transition this to the scenario bit, okay? And this really kind of falls in line to crucial conversations. And so, you know, researchers really help to inspire, push, and challenge designers, engineers, and product managers. But, you know, Renee is going to dive a little bit deeper into these types of scenarios. All right. So before we get into that, you know, what is a crucial conversation? I mean, this is the most simple definition. It's a discussion between two or more people where stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. And I know you guys are very familiar with this. And so Renee will kind of go over some of these and sort of talk about some ways that you can navigate through that.
Yeah, keywords in that previous slide, inspire, push, and push not meaning in the bad way, but push in the right direction, right? And then also challenge. Where are there opportunities that we're not thinking about? Where are the groups of people that we're not even considering? So challenging the systems, challenging the requests, the asks a little bit to kind of provoke a better direction and a better outcome. All right, so let's go to, so when you're good. So when research is not involved, and I'll let Harrison kind of tackle this, but one of the things I wanted to just talk about in terms of the crucial conversations is being able to have those candid conversations with your partners that come from a place of trust. You are telling and having these crucial conversations because you want the best outcomes for the organization, for your users, for your customers. So I'm able to go to my design partners and say, listen, that concept that you created, that's not going to necessarily be the right thing that we want to present to our test base or our user base or things like that. We want to make sure that these concepts are more inclusive. Why is it one type of demographic in this concept? So it could be as, I don't want to say small, but as early in the process as if you're not having these candid and crucial conversations with your partners as early as concept testing, it's going to be a lot difficult down the line to be able to talk about strategy as well. So it can start really small with these conversations. Again, other conversations about being able to push back a little bit. Harrison talked about, kind of pumping the brakes a little bit. Are we going too fast, or do we need to kind of rethink and go back and do some more testing versus just try to get it out the door? If we do get it out the door, what's the plan to do some more evaluative research so when it's in our customers' hands, how are we testing and iterating on it? So those are the type of crucial conversations you want to have with your partners.
Yeah, and I just want to go over this very briefly. When you don't actually have research involved, you tend to have longer development cycles, right? Your team is operating on assumptions, and I've been through cycles that have lasted years when there's been a reluctance for research. However, this is something that's extremely important because all in all, it will just prevent headaches across the board, right? Number two, incomplete picture. So quantitative analytics can only go so far. You need to sort of understand what the actual emotional pieces of it are. So for instance, if you're looking at a drop-off percentage on, a funnel, you may not understand sort of the fact that maybe users are getting upset and frustrated about things, right? So that's sort of a high-level example. And then number two, long-term, there's little customer value because you're not prioritizing and really focusing on the things that are effective that you've heard through research. And so operating on assumptions won't create sustained value for your researchers. And ultimately, that is going to play a major role in the growth of your organization from a user perspective, even from a financial perspective as well. So it's important to really educate your cross-functional teams on leveraging research at different parts of the design process, right? So, I always kind of think of it in terms of, from a design perspective, we don't necessarily have to know every single method in regards to research, but we should generally know how they can be applied. Because in design, generally in your process, you're working through a number of different constraints, whether it's through time, which we've touched on quite a bit, whether it's through resourcing, and even dependent on sort of the principles that your company is aligning on as well. And so here is the last piece that we're going to wrap it up with, and that is practice. So we've rounded you off with process. We've also done, Renee, you have to help me. I'm blanking here. We've got process, we've got practice, whatever. We'll get to that
partnership.
And partnership.
how you can put these things into practice.
We're talking about practice, Renee.
Practice.
We're talking about practice.
Yes, practice.
So, Renee, why don't you take these? We're going to kind of wrap up the practice piece.
Yep. Really quick.
With sort of these quick points.
Yeah. So really quick. So remember to kind of develop a shared language between the designer and researcher. So what that means, going back to that baseline of what does the process look like, and does your designer discover research means evaluative research means formative? Can they apply that? And then begin to really use those terminologies within your day-to-day as you're talking and brainstorming and become thought partners. Use that same language so that when you are in rooms with your partners, you start utilizing those same terminologies, and your partners then begin to adapt and understand. Even again, remember what I said earlier, investigate instead of validate. Even that terminology, start really having that shared knowledge and language.
Yeah, on this next piece, again, I was talking about making time. Time is going to be the foundational component of this. So really aim to be proactive and instead of reactive, right? So it's getting ahead of conversations. It's sort of looking at different areas in terms of your process where there's opportunities. And ultimately, even from a management perspective, if I'm more proactive, I can also look at where we can start bringing in more resources as well. And then on this last piece, it's really educating your peers on the phases and methods of research and the value that they can provide to your team and product. I think what we went over earlier and what we talked about in the shared language piece, just give people a level of familiarity and really kind of cater to that audience. And as a designer and as a researcher, it's really important to understand what are the types of details that are really going to captivate your audience. We talking about practice.
We talking about practice. Put it into practice. We may be dating ourselves here, but for those who understand what we're throwing up here, yeah. One thing I'll just add there in terms of, can you just go back one slide for me, Harrison? One thing I'll add here is, a lot of times when you hear about the researcher-designer relationship, about, again, that just testing, and validation and things like that. Again, I don't like to say validate, but user testing surveys and things like that. But when designers actually realize, again, through shared knowledge and shared language, that researchers have the ability to do secondary research, actually pulling from academic papers and research that has already been done. I love when my designers and engineers can come to me and say, hey, do we have any research that may be industry, market research, or things like that, and I have market research partners, before they're just like, can we test this? Are there information that we already know that we can leverage? And so once they understand kind of the toolbox that we have as researchers, it makes, again, helping them to strategize even better.
Awesome. So we are going to summarize this very briefly with the 3 Ps. So for one, process, develop a shared language and understanding. Partnership, be proactive. Practice, educate your peers. And then obviously employ this. And it goes round and round and round, right? This is a flywheel. And so the moment that you start doing this, start small, right? Start small and make it a snowball effect. You'll start to see a lot of transformation happen, not only for you as a researcher, not only for you as a designer, but you'll see that transformation happen as a partnership and ultimately your organization. And so again, just to kind of summarize it up, you will then transform from being that IC to a strategic partner. And I think that's the part that is extremely important when it comes to your growth, because it can just lead to so many more opportunities for you.
Yeah, make sure you're managing that relationship, right? It's not just a one-sided thing. It has to be a partnership that you're managing and constantly investing in. Be intentional about how are we going about this project? What can we do different? Is there anything we need to look back on? What are the type of, again, different processes that we need to apply to this? Be intentional about managing that relationship with your partners.
Awesome. So that is it. We made it. We have about 7 more minutes for Q&A, but before we do that, Renee, how might people get in touch with you?
Throw it up on the screen. You can take a screenshot of this. So on all of the social medias, of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. I dropped our LinkedIn URLs in the chat as well, but definitely check me out on Twitter, Instagram. Go to my website. I am so excited to announce that I'm finally dropping the Queen's Gems. My podcast is coming out soon. So definitely go on my website, the Renee, to sign up to be the first. I love it. Thank you. To hear what I dropped. And then Harrison.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If you have the app, the LinkedIn app, you open up the app, just go to your search bar, click on the QR code, and you can scan that code really quick. Shameless plug, my team a couple of years ago was the one that created this for our app.
Awesome.
And then over to you.
And yeah, so you know, in the same way, you'll notice the Twitter and the Instagram handles, just great personal branding. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram. You can visit me, first name, last name, on my website. And then I also launched a podcast earlier this year called Technically Speaking. And so you can check that out at gettechnical.io. Just reached 10 episodes, more than 1,000 listens. I'm surprised people want to listen to me, but you know, it is what it is.
Done. Congratulations, Holly. That's amazing.
And then thank you so much. You can scan with me. So we got 5 minutes left. So feel free to put any sort of questions that you guys have in the chat. We'll go ahead and actually kind of take what we can given the time constraints. We apologize for all the technical difficulties, but
we got it. We got through. Stacy has a really great question. Hey, Stacy. Stacy. A really great question around building trust to be able to implement everything that we're talking about here, right? What does that foundation of trust look like? So, and as a manager, I would love to hear from you, Harrison. How are you building trust for your team so that these type of things can take place?
Yeah. You know, trust. I actually had a presentation before where I did something around the trust flywheel. And it's really going to be around advocating and educating, right? You need to do that. They need to put it into practice, and then people need to see results. Okay. So, you know, it's good to talk about it. And I've generally found talking about it over a period of time, if you don't do action, it's just hard to get people behind it, right? So really kind of start small. There's small organizations, small teams that are really bought an idea, start with them and organically let it grow.
Yeah, I would say what has really worked for me that I discovered over time was how can I kind of over communicate the things that I'm doing on a weekly, daily basis to get people kind of interested all the time. So I used to be in the discipline where I did all my research, waited to the end, and then delivered the report. And that could be a long time. But how I started building trust was over time, I was delivering these piecemeals of information, whether it's kind of these daily doses of, hey, here's what happened in today's sessions. Again, not doing the full themes or things, but really calling out some things so that people can start thinking about, okay, so getting in front of things more often and, you know, over communicating is not a bad thing, especially when they see the value that you are presenting. Excuse me. So Stacey, I would say over communicate and do those bite-sized type of tapas, type of information. Don't try to do all of this at one time. It has to be something. And then to your point, it's an investment, right? It is going to take time to build it up.
Yeah. Jasmine, where does the role of UX content strategist fit into this process? That's a great question. And Renee, you feel free to elaborate on this, but at least in our organization, UX writing is actually integrated with our UER team.
Yep. Yeah, it's really cool. So even early on from concept testing, we are working hand in hand in making sure the verbiage and what we're using and the voice and tone even of our concepts are correct. So we're not waiting all the way to the end to say, okay, we've got this finished thing. Let's do our checks and balances of what these words look like. They are so instrumental in helping us rethink, even the designers rethink of how. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, Laura Epsom is just thrown in there because it's like kind of like placement words and like junk words. Right? People respond so much better to having kind of like the real content. And you can do that in a lo-fi, it doesn't have to be hi-fi. But our content strategists are so important in helping us even getting the concepts right.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So in terms of like that double diamond, they're instrumental in terms of like the formative, not just at the end of the evaluate.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chris Harrison, can you share any recommendations on creative ways to centralize data collected from multiple internal departments? Do you have any recommendations for establishing an internal CRM? Like, this is a leading question. I think you kind of have the answer here around creating a CRM for internal department research purposes. So different companies do different things. Actually, I think at um, an old startup, we actually used to use Evernote. And so you could actually search through Evernote and tag, your items. So I think a lot of times it is an afterthought from an organization perspective, right? But access is actually very, very important because even if you're doing, I can tell you what, research sort of programs that we've done in the past, like 4 years ago, have informed new sort of design. So having an accessible point and centralized point for your partners to easily access things is extremely important. And by the way, that's not just singular to research, right? With Figma and design, like we used to, even in Vision before that, we used to have files everywhere. And so I think it's up to you guys to really work with your organization and really iterate on how you can better share content.
The repository of information is a age-long issue, and it just, no one has mastered it. There have been some tools that people have tried to create, but what the biggest barriers, like how do other organizations within the company like understand the system, the IA of what you're trying to do. So no one has figured it out yet. So a lot of times it's just what works for the individual organization. It's going to be different from organization to organization, for sure. Yeah.
Is the Samurai going to come and get us? I'm trying to figure this out because we're at 1:15.
Yeah. So we made this like all of a sudden cut off, but before we do, we'll keep going until we do. But thank you all so much.
Yeah.
This has been fantastic. So much good. Hey Jimmy. Hey, good. Oh, I love seeing.
Hey, what's up, bro?
But yeah, we'll probably have to do like a follow-up podcast on this. Yeah.
Hey, what? Okay. Actually, you're on my last podcast, speaking of podcasts. So check it out. It is about the art and science of research.
That's right. I am episode 10 across the board. So rounded out the first season. But these were really great questions. Right. We definitely represent the shirts. Shout out to the organization, the organizers of this event, Tucson. Amazing. Love that this was free, that everyone had access to.
Yeah.
So this is just so good for everyone to have visibility and connect with one another for sure during these times. This is such an important space for us to hold in the midst. So thank you for investing in yourself during this time. This is huge, right? All this information that we're getting. Let's see if we get one more question. I think I saw your brother's in the building. What's up, Eric? That's so great. I love when the family comes to support. That's great. Product inclusion. This is great. In the design process, do you take inclusion into account? If so, how? Great question, Rashida. Come on, design manager, how are you?
So look, there are so many different facets. Whether it comes from design systems, I think the writing is also extremely important as well. I'm really blurred, I don't know why. Also too, in terms of research, we're starting to ask a lot of those hard questions with our product managers, right? Are we actually being inclusive in terms of the audience that we're kind of vetting for the research that we're doing? So we're doing a lot of that. I think it's actually very, when we start talking about, I don't want to say, no, I'm not going to say this because I hate that word. When we start thinking about the influences in terms of how we're building our products, inclusion should be very well as a part of that, right? It needs to go beyond just obviously accessibility. We should be thinking about sort of the background of our users, like the context and the environment that they're working in. And I think, unfortunately, those conversations haven't been happening long enough, but they're starting to happen now. And I think that's what's important. I think it's up to us to really start to drive how about this. It's up to us to hold our design and leadership organizations accountable to start investing in this and really making it, a part of the design culture.
Yeah, I'm big on, again, that shared language. When you as an organization, as a team, can really understand that you are designing for the human experience. Users sometimes is not as empathetic of just that word, but when you understand you are designing for humans and what you do has not just culture impact, but global impact on what you're doing, you really start to help people change their outlook in terms of how they're approaching the problem and the solution. When engineers are able to literally start asking, why are we building this? Who will we be building this for? That's amazing. So product inclusion has to be in part ingrained in the fabric of the culture of the team and organization. I know a lot of organizations are starting to think about it more now. So it's not something that you just tack on at the end. That's a lot more harder to get things done then. It's got to be ingrained early in the process. So like I mentioned earlier as the example, as researchers, right, we need to make sure that we're advocating for representation even within our concepts, in the mocks. What does that look like? When we're recruiting for demographics and recruiting for users, let's make sure that we're having this conversation with our product partners, that we're not just looking at, very small or groups of people that don't necessarily represent a larger group. So we have to have those crucial conversations early and often with our partner to really help push them in the right direction and start talking about product inclusion very early.
Awesome. I think there was one more question around what is the ratio and what would be ideal. And I think that's a great.
Did Harrison freeze again? No, he did. Come on. Okay, I'm going to take a screenshot of Harrison freezing again. Real quick. Is the question the ratio of researchers and designers? I didn't see the question that he's referring to. Can anyone drop the question? What's the ratio of designers to researchers on LinkedIn? Got it. Okay. So it depends on teams. So for me right now, I support 5. At one time, I supported 5 designers. So it can vary by team. So 1 to 5, 1 to 3, and he's back. I would say sometimes it depends on, the ratio depends on teams. So there was one team when I was supporting 5 designers, and there were some teams where I was supporting a smaller amount. So what does that look like on your squad?
Yeah, so we don't have enough researchers.
Sorry, did you say that one more time?
Oh, we don't have enough researchers.
But I think that's industry-wide, right? I think that's like something like it's literally that's industry, that there's literally usually double the part of the research.
It is. But however, we do have researchers in the organization. It really does come down to prioritizing which areas we want to have research in. And so, as we mentioned before, me as a design manager, having that shared language with my research partners, I can identify which projects need what type of research things that they need, right? And because I'm ahead of my schedule in terms of planning, we can actually kind of plan out where we'll put resource efforts down the line, and then maybe sort of say, hey, you know what? Now that we are developing different programs around these different phases, we can sort of say, look, we have these types of options for programming that we can start really kind of putting our work through the rigor to understand. So, we're working through it. We make it happen.
Yeah, and I think also, again, with that shared language, you start to understand like what things can happen asynchronously, so that you've got things in motion that can overlap. When one starts, another one begins. So that planning portion is really important. And then also, a lot of it is just, again, going back to what I was saying, is when people understand kind of the toolbox of research, that it may not require a huge qualitative, longitudinal study that's going to take a while. It may not take a full huge quantitative study. We may have secondary research that we can leverage and then make the call on some certain things. So it could be a more succinct study that maybe we just get some quant data and doing like small releases and then roll back. And again, I'm speaking from my entire UX knowledge of like career. So this is not something that's not necessarily about LinkedIn, but I've just seen this in terms of how do you manage being able to tackle all your projects. There's just different ways.
Awesome. So look, I think that is it for questions. Renee,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure. It has been a journey to my desktop and back to the internet. It's like a magic trick.
But we did it. Our first one.
And we gotta make it happen. It just never gets old. Okay.
Never. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for hanging out with us a little bit longer past the time, almost a full hour. So really appreciate it. Very grateful for all of you. I'm really excited about the new connections and continuing this conversation as well. So definitely connect with us. Thank you all. I see all of you.
Thank you.
We see you.
It's a wrap. By the way, it's a wrap, Renee.
Come on. Yes.
Wrap. Follow her on Instagram. You have to see her wraps. She's got the wrap mask integration. So peep that.
Oh, I should have. Okay. And then we'll end it here. Y'all be safe.
There we go.
All right. Thank you all. Blessings. Be safe. Enjoy the rest of the conference.